First contact. Admiral Jack Mason stood at the command deck of the UEFS Nova, gazing at the holographic display showing the approaching alien fleet. The vessels were unlike anything humans had ever seen before, sleek, crystalline structures that seemed to bend light around them as they moved. "How long until they reach our outer defense perimeter?" Mason asked, his voice calm despite the tension filling the room. Lieutenant Kate Powell checked her console. 17 hours, sir. They're maintaining constant speed and formation. Mason nodded, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. Humanity had prepared for this moment for generations. The question was never if aliens existed, but when they would arrive. The United Earth Defense Force had been established precisely for this eventuality. "Send the prepared greeting package on all frequencies," Mason ordered, "and alert Dr. Wright that she's needed on the bridge immediately." Dr. Olivia Wright arrived minutes later, her eyes bright with both anxiety and excitement. As Earth's leading xenolinguist, she had spent decades developing potential communication protocols for first contact scenarios. "They're responding, Admiral," Communications Officer Ben Harris announced. "The signal contains both audio and visual components. It's translating itself somehow." The main screen flickered to life, revealing a tall, humanoid figure with iridescent scales covering its face. Its eyes were vertical slits of amber, and when it spoke, a series of clicks and whistles emerged before being seamlessly translated into English. "I am Calfax, emissary of the Zellery Empire. Your world has been noticed by our Emperor. Rejoice, as you have been chosen for integration." Dr. Wright stepped forward. "We welcome peaceful contact and wish to arrange a diplomatic meeting to discuss relations between our civilizations." The aliens seemed amused. "Arrangements have already been made. You will prepare your leaders to receive terms aboard our vessel." Mason intervened. "We propose a neutral location. We have a space station at Lagrange Point L4 that could serve as a meeting ground." After a brief pause, Calfax agreed. 3 days later, Mason led a delegation including Dr. Wright, Defense Secretary Ryan Oakes, and a security team to the meeting. The station had been transformed into a makeshift diplomatic center, with Earth flags displayed prominently alongside unfamiliar Zellery symbols. The aliens arrived in what could only be described as a show of force. 12 warriors in gleaming armor flanking Calfax, who now wore elaborate regalia that seemed to pulse with inner light. The mighty Zellery Empire spans 27 star systems. Calfax began without preamble. "We bring order, technology, and protection. In return, new members provide resources and acknowledge imperial authority." Dr. Wright translated the diplomatic language easily enough. This wasn't an offer of alliance. It was a demand for submission. Secretary Oakes leaned toward Mason. "They're not here to negotiate. This is a conquest with pleasantries." Mason studied the aliens carefully. Their posture, their positioning in the room, their casual dismissal of human customs. Everything indicated they expected no resistance. "We have reviewed your terms," Mason said finally, standing to his full height. "The people of Earth value their independence above all else. We decline your offer of integration." Calfax's scales rippled in what appeared to be surprise, then amusement. "Perhaps you misunderstand. This is not an offer that can be declined. The Empire has chosen Earth." Mason stepped closer, his eyes never leaving the alien emissary. "And perhaps you misunderstand us. Humanity does not submit. We suggest you leave our system immediately. You would threaten the Empire." Calfax's voice carried genuine surprise. "Your primitive weapons and single planet against our galactic might." Mason smiled slightly. "This is not a threat. It's a warning, delivered out of respect for life. We have no desire for conflict, but if forced, we will respond with everything we have." Calfax laughed, a strange clicking sound that his translator struggled to convey. "The Emperor will find your species' confidence amusing. We shall return with the integration fleet in 7 cycles. Prepare your world for transition." As the Zellery delegation departed, Dr. Wright turned to Mason. They've never been refused before, have they? No, Mason replied, watching the alien ship disconnect from the station. And that may be their greatest weakness. The Zellery diplomatic vessel departed the station, leaving Admiral Mason and his team to consider their next move. The Admiral wasted no time, immediately opening a secure channel to Earth Defense Headquarters. They're not backing down, Mason reported to the United Earth Council displayed on the view screen. The Zellery expect us to surrender without resistance. General Helen Carter, head of Earth's military forces, leaned forward. Their confidence suggests they've never encountered significant opposition before. Exactly, Mason agreed. We need to gather all available intelligence on these Zellery immediately. Within hours, Dr. Nathan Collins and his team of analysts were working around the clock. They intercepted and decoded Zellery communications, studied their ship designs, and analyzed every second of the recorded meeting. Admiral, you need to see this, Dr. Collins called, 3 days into their research. His normally calm face showed rare excitement. Mason joined him at the holographic display where Collins had compiled his findings. The Zellery Empire has conquered 27 systems, but all were pre-spaceflight civilizations, Collins explained. They've never faced an interplanetary species with military capabilities. Mason studied the data. They don't know how to fight a real war. There's more, Collins continued, bringing up technical schematics. Their shield technology is advanced, but operates on a predictable frequency pattern. If we can synchronize our weapons to these frequencies, we could bypass their defenses entirely, Mason finished, understanding immediately. The next day, Earth received another transmission from the approaching Zellery fleet. The main integration force had arrived early. Cal Thax appeared on screen, his scales now adorned with ceremonial markings. Your allotted time for preparation has been reduced. Your Mars colony has been chosen for demonstration purposes. Before Mason could respond, long-range sensors detected energy buildups in the Zellery ships. Moments later, explosions bloomed across the red planet's surface. The Era's research station, Lieutenant Powell whispered, 2,000 civilians. Mason's face hardened. Send them our response. The message was brief. This is your final warning. Run. Calthax's laughter echoed through the communication system. Your bravado is noted, humans. Now witness the price of defiance. The Zellery fleet moved into formation, preparing to advance toward Earth. They never noticed the small, stealth satellites that had been quietly positioning around their ships. Quantum disruption grid is in place, Admiral, Powell reported. Mason nodded. Activate Defense Protocol Omega. Across the solar system, hidden installations on moons, asteroids, and orbital stations powered up. Earth's true military capability, carefully concealed from initial scans, revealed itself. The Zellery fleet suddenly found itself surrounded by previously undetected human vessels emerging from concealed positions. Their sensors, calibrated for traditional propulsion systems, had missed Earth's gravity manipulation drives. They're charging weapons, Powell announced. Let them fire first, Mason ordered. Then execute the shield bypass. The Zellery ships launched a devastating barrage, expecting to cripple Earth's defenses. Instead, their energy weapons dissipated harmlessly against previously unknown defensive fields. Now, Mason commanded. The quantum disruption grid activated, creating microsecond vulnerabilities in the Zellery shields. Simultaneously, human vessels fired precisely calibrated missiles that exploited these gaps. The Zellery flagship erupted in flames as its shields failed catastrophically. 2 support vessels suffered similar fates within seconds. Calthax's face appeared again on screen, rage and confusion evident. Impossible. Your technology is primitive. No, Mason replied calmly. Your intelligence was incomplete. That was your first mistake. The Zellery vessels began emergency maneuvers, attempting to retreat and regroup. They're trying to reach their jump points, Powell reported. Mason nodded. Deploy the interceptors. Don't let them report back. As the human forces moved to cut off their escape, Mason watched the Zellery ship's desperate attempts to flee. "We warned you," he said quietly to the screen, though the connection had already been severed. "You should have run while you had the chance." Lieutenant Samantha Green felt her pulse quicken as her stealth fighter detached from the carrier bay. Around her, 11 other pilots launched in perfect formation, their vessels nearly invisible against the backdrop of space. "Phantom Squadron, check in," she commanded, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. One by one, her pilots confirmed readiness. These experimental craft represented humanity's most advanced technology. Quantum-shielded hulls that absorbed rather than reflected sensor scans, making them effectively invisible to Zellery detection systems. "Remember your training," Green reminded them. "Their targeting systems can't lock what they can't see. Strike fast, strike hard, then vanish." Across the battlefield, Captain Eric Daniels stood on the bridge of the UEF's Defiance, the largest warship in Earth's fleet. Unlike the sleek, crystalline designs of Zellery vessels, the Defiance was built for practical combat. A massive armored platform bristling with weapons systems and protected by layered defense fields. "The remaining Zellery vessels are regrouping at coordinates Mark 7. His tactical officer reported. "They're calling for reinforcements." Daniels nodded. "As expected. Admiral Mason's strategy is working perfectly." The plan was elegant in its simplicity. The initial counterattack wasn't meant to destroy the entire Zellery force. It was designed to shock them, to make them call for help, and to reveal their communication protocols. "Signal Lieutenant Green," Daniels ordered. "Begin Phase 2. In her stealth fighter, Green received the command and smiled. "Phantoms, new targeting data incoming. Prepare disruptor missiles." The squadron accelerated silently toward the damaged Zellery command vessel. Unlike conventional weapons, disruptor missiles didn't rely on explosive force. They were designed to interface with Zellery computer systems, introducing cascading errors that would render their technology useless. "Zellery reinforcements will arrive in approximately 17 minutes. Green's onboard AI informed her. "Plenty of time," she replied. "Phantoms, execute attack pattern Delta." The fighters broke formation, each targeting different critical systems on the command ship. Green's missiles struck first, penetrating the already weakened shields and attaching to the vessel's main communication array. Within seconds, the Zellery ship's external lights flickered. Its weapon systems powered down as the disruptor code spread through its networks. "Target neutralized," Green reported, moving to secondary objectives. Meanwhile, the Defiance approached the disabled command vessel. Captain Daniels opened a channel to the Zellery ship. "Attention Zellery vessel. Your shields and weapons are offline. Your communications have been isolated. You can no longer call for help or coordinate with your fleet." The Zellery commander appeared on screen, his scales flaring with anger. "This technology is impossible. Your species was assessed as barely capable of interplanetary travel." Daniels smiled coolly. "That assessment was based on what we wanted you to see. A common human strategy. Never reveal your true strength to a potential enemy. The Empire will crush your world for this defiance." "Your reinforcements won't help you," Daniels replied. "While we've been talking, we've been tracking their approach through hyperspace." The Zellery commander's eyes widened in shock. "Impossible. You cannot track ships through dimensional transit." "Another miscalculation on your part," Daniels said. "We've studied the hyperspace wake patterns of your test jumps since you entered our system. Your technology is predictable." On cue, his communications officer reported. "Sir, the Zellery reinforcements have emerged from hyperspace." "Directly into our waiting ambush," Daniels finished. "Phantom Squadron, you are cleared to engage." Green and her pilots were already in position. The emerging Zellery ships, expecting to find a battle in progress, instead found themselves surrounded by previously undetected human vessels. "Fire at will," Green commanded. The ambush was devastatingly effective. Having never faced an enemy who could anticipate their movements through hyperspace, the Zelari had no defensive protocols in place. As the battle concluded, Admiral Mason's voice came through on all channels. The Zelari Empire has never faced humanity in war before. Today, they learn why that was fortunate for them. The destruction of the Zelari reinforcement fleet reverberated across the Empire. Emperor Vorkathel, seated on his crystalline throne aboard the Imperial flagship, Eternal Dominion, received the news with cold fury. "These humans dare to challenge us," he hissed, scales rippling with anger. "Prepare the Armada. We will crush this insolence personally." Deep within the Lunar Command Center, Admiral Lisa Rivera monitored the long-range sensor data with growing concern. The massive energy signatures approaching the solar system dwarfed anything they had faced thus far. "The Emperor is coming himself," she announced to the assembled Earth Defense Council. Their fleet numbers in the hundreds. Admiral Mason's holographic image nodded grimly. "Then we proceed with Operation Hornet's Nest. Are the drone swarms ready?" Dr. Alan Rodriguez stepped forward, his lab coat contrasting with the military uniforms around him. "The autonomous units are deployed and waiting. I've completed the shield frequency disruptors on all models." The heart of humanity's defense strategy wasn't overwhelming firepower but adaptability. While the Zelari relied on brute force and numerical superiority, Earth had developed thousands of AI-controlled drones, each no larger than a coffee cup but carrying sophisticated electronic warfare capabilities. "Begin preemptive strikes," Rivera ordered. "Activate the hidden bases on Europa and Titan." Throughout the outer solar system, concealed military installations that had remained dormant for years suddenly hummed to life. The people of Earth had suspected they might not be alone in the galaxy and had prepared accordingly, building defenses in secret for generations. When the Zelari Armada arrived 3 days later, they found not a cowering planet awaiting conquest, but a carefully prepared battlefield. Their advanced scouts encountered the first wave of drone swarms near Neptune's orbit. "The humans are deploying primitive remote weapons," reported the Zelari fleet commander. "Engaging countermeasures." The drones appeared to be destroyed easily by Zelari energy beams. What the aliens didn't realize was that each destroyed drone released microscopic secondary drones that attached to their hulls, gathering data and preparing for coordinated action. In the command center, Dr. Rodriguez watched the telemetry with satisfaction. "They're taking the bait. The microdrones are in position on 87% of their forward vessels." Admiral Rivera nodded. "Perfect. Now show them what these primitive weapons can do." At her command, the microdrones activated simultaneously. They didn't attempt to damage the Zelari ships directly. Instead, they interfered with their sensor systems, creating phantom targets and obscuring actual human vessels. "They're blind," Rivera observed as the Zelari fleet began firing wildly at non-existent targets. Meanwhile, human forces emerged from hidden bases throughout the solar system. The colonies on Europa and Titan, which the Zelari had dismissed as scientific outposts, revealed their true nature as heavily armed fortresses. Multiple human vessels detected. The Zelari commander shouted as his tactical display became cluttered with new contacts. They were hiding on the moons and asteroids. The Emperor's voice cut through the chaos. "Deploy the planet killer weapons. We will make an example of their Mars colony." But as the Zelari planet killer ships moved into position, they encountered yet another surprise. The surface of Mars itself seemed to transform as massive defense cannons emerged from beneath the red soil. "Did they think we wouldn't protect our colonies after their first attack?" Rivera said grimly as she gave the order. "All Mars defense platforms, open fire." The Zelari had never encountered guerrilla warfare on a planetary scale. Their military doctrine centered on overwhelming force against unprepared opponents. They had no protocols for an enemy who fought from hidden positions, used deception as a primary tactic, and turned their own technology against them. "Send word to the Emperor," Rivera instructed her communications officer. "Tell him our earlier message still stands. Run. while you still can. The Zelleri Imperial flagship, Eternal Dominion, hung in space like a wounded predator. Its once gleaming hull now bore the scars of multiple human attacks, and internal fires cast an eerie glow through breaches in its armor plating. Emperor Vorkathel slammed his scaled fist against the command console. These humans must be made to understand their place. Open a direct channel to their leaders. The Emperor's message transmitted across all frequencies. His face appeared on screens throughout Earth's defense network, scales flaring with rage. People of Earth, he began, voice dripping with menace. Your resistance, while impressive, is futile. We possess weapons capable of rendering your world uninhabitable. Surrender now, or we will demonstrate our power on your moon colony. In the Lunar Command Center, Admiral Rivera watched the transmission with narrowed eyes. He's desperate, she observed to her staff. Their losses have been too great to ignore. Communications Officer Frank Miller looked up from his station. Admiral, Commander Wilson's team has completed their operation. They're ready to transmit. Rivera nodded. Perfect timing. Let's show the Emperor what we've been doing while he's been making threats. Commander Paul Wilson and his Special Operations team had spent the past week infiltrating the Zelleri communication network. Using captured technology from disabled enemy ships, they had gained access to the Empire's central data repositories. Send our response, Rivera ordered. The Emperor's threatening image on the main screen was suddenly replaced by footage from within his own ship, classified strategic meetings, private communications with his commanders, and most damaging of all, recordings of his orders to commit atrocities against previously conquered worlds. We've been in your networks for days, Rivera's voice announced over the footage. Your encryption was impressive, but not unbreakable. The transmission switched to show locations throughout the Zelleri Empire where subject species were watching the same footage. The Emperor's unfiltered contempt for those he conquered, his casual orders for genocide when faced with resistance, all displayed for his subjugated worlds to see. You threatened us with your planet killers, Rivera continued. But we've already uploaded shutdown codes to their targeting systems. Check them if you don't believe me. On the Imperial flagship, frantic technicians confirmed the humans' claim. Somehow, Earth's forces had compromised the Zelleri's most devastating weapons. Impossible, the Emperor roared, but the fear in his eyes betrayed his realization that the situation had spiraled beyond his control. The transmission continued relentlessly. While you were focused on our main fleet, we sent messages to every world in your empire. They now know the truth about their benevolent emperor. Reports began flooding in from across Zelleri territory. Uprisings had broken out on 7 worlds simultaneously. Subject species that had been kept separate and unaware of each other were now coordinating their resistance. The Volari mining colonies have overthrown their overseers, a Zelleri officer reported nervously. The Kreth battle slaves have seized control of 3 warships. The Emperor's inner circle exchanged worried glances. The Empire had always maintained control through division and misinformation. With those advantages gone, their relatively small military was spread too thin to maintain order everywhere at once. Admiral Rivera's face reappeared on screen. Your empire is built on lies and fear, Emperor. How many fronts can you fight on simultaneously? How many rebellions can you suppress? Commander Wilson's team had one final surprise. They activated dormant code hidden within the Zelleri communication systems, causing emergency alarms to trigger across their entire fleet. Your own ships are receiving false commands to retreat, Rivera explained calmly. Your commanders can't tell which orders are real anymore. As confusion spread through the Zelleri forces, Rivera delivered her final message. We warned you to run. That option is still available, but the window is closing rapidly. Ambassador Nicol Foster stood before the assembled representatives from 12 formerly subjugated species. The meeting chamber aboard the space station orbiting Jupiter had been hastily converted for this historic gathering, with translation systems working overtime to facilitate communication. For too long, the Zelleri Empire has kept you isolated from one another. Foster began, her voice firm but compassionate. They told each of you that you were alone in your resistance. Today, we prove that was a lie. The aliens before her were remarkably diverse. Some resembled Earth insects scaled to human size. Others were vaguely reptilian, and a few had physical forms that defied easy categorization. Yet all shared the same expression, cautious hope mixed with lingering fear. Humanity offers not conquest, but partnership, Foster continued. We share our shield-bypassing technology freely, with no demands for subjugation or tribute. A tall, four-armed being stepped forward. I am Soreth of the Pelian Collective. Why should we trust humans when we have been betrayed before? The Zelari also came with promises. Foster nodded respectfully. A fair question. Judge us by our actions, not just our words. Our ships have already delivered medical supplies to Pelian worlds. We ask nothing in return. Admiral Mason entered the chamber, accompanied by Dr. Olivia Wright. The xenolinguist had made a breakthrough that would change the course of the conflict. The Zelari maintained control partly through genetic engineering, Dr. Wright explained, displaying complex molecular structures on the view screen. Many of you were modified to ensure obedience. We've developed a counteragent that reverses these changes. A ripple of astonishment passed through the assembly. The Krell representative, whose species had been engineered as soldiers, stepped forward with trembling hands. You can free our warriors from their compulsion coding. The alien asked, hope evident in its multifaceted eyes. We already have, Mason replied. The first Krell battalions have been treated. They await your orders, not the Emperor's. The news spread like wildfire through the gathered representatives. Species that had been enemies under Zelari rule now saw the possibility of alliance. Foster moved among them, listening to their stories, building connections that would form the foundation of the Galactic Freedom Coalition. Meanwhile, in Earth orbit, Captain Daniels oversaw the integration of alien technology with human vessels. Volunteer engineers from the liberated species worked alongside Earth technicians, combining their knowledge to create ships more powerful than anything the Zelari had encountered. The Volari stealth systems are fully compatible with our quantum disruption missiles, reported Chief Engineer Donna Martinez. And the Krell have provided schematics for their heavy armor plating. Daniels nodded with satisfaction. Begin production immediately. The Coalition fleet needs to be ready within the week. The gathering momentum of rebellion threatened to overwhelm the Zelari Empire. Emperor Vorkathel, now confined to his fortress world, grew increasingly paranoid as reports of defections multiplied. Another battle group has deserted, his military advisor reported nervously. They've joined the human-led coalition. Traitors. The Emperor hissed. Execute their families as examples. The Human Intelligence Network warned them. Excellence. The families were evacuated before we could act. Back at Jupiter, the coalition forces assembled for inspection. Ships of every description formed a vast armada, their diverse designs reflecting the unique contributions of each species. In the center of the formation, Earth vessels served as command and coordination points. Admiral Mason addressed the combined fleet, his message translated simultaneously to over 30 languages. Today we strike not just for Earth, but for all free peoples, he declared. The Zelari Empire believed that differences between species made alliance impossible. We will prove them wrong. Ambassador Foster watched from the observation deck as the massive fleet prepared to depart. Do you think it will work? Dr. Wright asked quietly. Foster nodded, her eyes fixed on the ships. It has to. This isn't just about defeating the Zelari anymore. It's about building something better in their place. The Coalition fleet engaged their drives simultaneously, creating a spectacular ripple of energy as they accelerated toward their destinations. 12 Zelari strongholds that would face coordinated attacks within hours. The Zelari homeworld hung like a jewel in space, its crystalline cities gleaming under the light of 3 moons. For centuries, it had been the untouchable heart of an empire that spanned dozens of star systems. No enemy had ever penetrated this far into Zelari territory. Until today. The Coalition fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. Human vessels led the way, flanked by ships from every species that had once suffered under Imperial rule. Their combined firepower dwarfed anything the defenders could muster. Emperor Vorkaval watched in disbelief from his palace as the enemy armada filled the sky above his world. His remaining loyal advisors had fled, leaving only his personal guard. "This cannot be happening," he whispered, scales pale with fear. "The Empire has stood for 1,000 years." Captain Eric Daniels, now commanding the flagship of the Coalition fleet, opened a broadcast channel to the entire planet. "People of Zelaria," his voice echoed across the Imperial capital. "Your empire has fallen. Your colonies have declared independence. Your fleet has been defeated or has joined our cause." Imperial citizens gathered in streets and plazas, looking up at the projection of the human captain that filled the sky. "We did not come to destroy your world or your people," Daniels continued. "Our quarrel is with your leadership, not your civilization. The Coalition offers you a choice." Admiral Mason and Ambassador Foster stood beside Daniels on the bridge, representing Earth's military and diplomatic authority. Behind them stood representatives from each species in the Coalition, a living symbol of their unity. "Surrender Emperor Vorkaval and his high command," Foster said, her voice firm but not unkind. "In return, Zelaria will be granted membership in the Galactic Council as equals, not rulers." On the planet below, the Emperor's remaining loyalists prepared their final defenses. Planetary shield generators hummed to life, and ancient weapons platforms emerged from hidden bunkers. "They're activating their doomsday protocol," Lieutenant Powell reported from her tactical station. "Energy readings suggest they're preparing to destroy their own capital rather than surrender." Mason nodded grimly. "Deploy the frequency disruptors." Throughout the Coalition fleet, specialized transmitters activated, broadcasting the precise shield frequencies that Dr. Rodriguez had discovered. The seemingly impenetrable Zelari defenses flickered and failed. "Precision strikes only," Mason ordered. "Target military installations and government facilities. Civilian areas are to be avoided at all costs." The Coalition ships moved with surgical precision, disabling the Emperor's defenses without causing widespread destruction. On the surface, the Imperial Palace Guard found their weapons mysteriously deactivated. "What's happening?" the Emperor demanded as the lights in his throne room dimmed. The answer came not from his guards, but from his own military commanders. Led by Fleet Admiral Zelvarax, they entered the throne room with determination in their eyes. "The Empire is finished, Excellence," Zelvarax stated coldly. "You led us to ruin through arrogance and cruelty. We accept the Coalition's terms." As the Emperor was taken into custody by his own officers, the news spread across Zelaria. Centuries of Imperial propaganda dissolved in the face of undeniable reality. The unbeatable Empire had been beaten. 1 week later, representatives from 27 species gathered in the former Imperial Palace for the founding of the Galactic Council. Each world, regardless of size or military power, received equal representation and voting rights. Admiral Mason stood before the assembly to deliver Earth's address. The human who had first warned the Zelari to run now offered a different message. "Today marks the end of empire and the beginning of partnership," he said, looking across the diverse faces before him. "Humanity did not fight this war to replace one ruler with another. We fought because we believe all sentient beings deserve freedom and self-determination." Ambassador Foster stepped forward to present the founding charter of the Council. This document enshrines the principles of mutual respect, shared defense, and cultural autonomy that will guide us forward. As former enemies signed their names to the charter, the Zelari representative approached Mason. "You could have destroyed us," the alien said quietly. "Why didn't you?" Mason smiled slightly. "Because that was never our goal. We warned you to run not because we wanted to conquer you, but because we wanted to avoid unnecessary bloodshed." He looked out at the gathered representatives, former slaves and masters, predators and prey, all now equals under law. We invited you to stand with us instead, Mason concluded. That invitation remains open to all who wish to join us as partners rather than subjects.